minute. I'm going to plug my phone in and pee. Well, hello, everybody. This is going to be a great show. A little bit different topic than we've gotten into. You know what, Oscar? Let me stop this for a second. You asked me a question and an answer. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. This is going to be a lot of fun. Just been visiting with my new friend from Atlanta, Georgia, Mr. Oscar Sierra. Oscar, how are you today?
I am doing great. It's spring day. I blew off all the pollen from the front and back doors, as well as did the quarterly take my leaf blower, because I don't really care about leaves. I care to use the leaf blower mostly as a cleaning instrument. So I blew off all of the HEPA filters that are in each and every one of my clinic rooms. And sometimes there's more than two in there and up on the plenum and stuff. So it's always kind of fun to see what I might have been breathing in indoors had I not had the IQ Air, the Austin Airs, and the HEPA filters pretty much everywhere. So,
well, great. Yeah, I think we got the same issue down here in Texas. You know, just a lot of stuff blowing through the last few months. But well, I want to talk today about a lot of things. I mean, you're an herbalist by profession. You're also an acupuncturist. So let's just start at the top. Tell people about traditional Chinese medicine, herbs.
yeah, it's a big topic. So traditional Chinese medicine is part of the lenses that one of the several lenses that I use to look at health and healing in people, the environment, pathology, and the whole situation. It's been around for, conservatively speaking, 4,000 years in a written tradition. So whereas I'm a fan of Western conventional allopathic medicine, especially in the diagnostics and the technology that, a CT, PET CT scan, or, carotid intimate media thickness ultrasound may prefer, and some of the, accurate analytics of like, immunoglobulin EEG and A testing and so forth. That's all cool, but it hasn't been around for that long. And it's more of an and for me. So it's like, those are cool, but let's use stuff that's been around for longer that may be cheaper to access and a lower entry point. I do work with a homeless population here in Atlanta for many, many years, and they can't afford a whole lot of these lab work. So tongue and pulse diagnosis and eye diagnosis, which has been around for thousands of years, might get you some pretty cool information without having to wait for a CT scan or blood work that may not be covered by someone's insurance. So yeah, Chinese medicine, pretty cool stuff. There's the diagnostic side of Chinese medicine, along with this whole epistemology of understanding, how it is that both health and pathology came to be, as well as the intervention side, which is going to be, acupuncture, which is famous because it's weird and crazy, and Kung Fu Panda happened, as well as the botanical side, which is really where most of the literature is. And then there's the dietary side, and then there's movement and like Tai Chi, Qigong, Tuina, things that are part of that system of medicine. But I'm not exclusively married to Chinese medicine. It's just where I got a lot of my initial training. But I have an equal amount of respect, but not as much knowledge in Ayurveda and Western folk medicine. And even I'm here in the South of the United States, and the Southeast has interesting repository, because it's kind of podunk at times and parts of, Creek, Cherokee, Southern Appalachian folk medicine, which borrows a lot from, the enslaved people that came from Africa, as well as the Irish and the Creek and the Cherokee. So I'm a fan of trad, traditional. So when physicians sometimes say, "Oh, I practice traditional medicine," I say, "No, you practice conventional medicine, and that's cool. I practice traditional medicine. My medicine is a tradition of thousands of years. Yours has less than that," which is, I'm not saying that in a pejorative way, but there's traditional and there's conventional. So yes, Chinese medicine is a piece of the puzzle when it comes to dialing in diagnostics as well as interventions. That's pretty cool.
And so let's stay on the acupuncture for a couple of minutes here because I really want to get in depth with the foods and foods that heal. But for Westerners, a lot of times, we go to an acupuncturist or an Ayurvedic doctor for that matter, and probably in much lesser cases, not a whole lot of Ayurvedic doctors around the U.S. There's some, one very good one in Dallas here I've been working with for years, but what about nadis? Can you explain nadis to people and meridians so they kind of understand how the body works? Because these are very non-Western ideas, but when people hear them, they make sense. It's just very logical.
Yeah, so just like we have a concept of blood vessels, some that go to the heart, some that go away from the heart, and we kind of we may not see them, but we know that they're there and they have this flow. Chinese medicine has an understanding of energy, qi, if you will, that has a rhythmic pattern and that is supposed to go in a direction. Like when you swallow, the qi is supposed to go down. In the West, we call this peristalsis and smooth muscle contractions that are undulating down from your mouth to your butt. But we clearly, without someone opening a textbook, kind of understand that there's up energy and down energy, there's out energy, and there's in and contracted energy. And this is all chi. And when there is a balance of chi that goes, up when you are, getting up and getting going in the morning and taking a big deep breath and going like this, outside after you maybe peed outside, which is one of my favorite things to do. That's up energy. And then there's, down energy, like when you swallow and, peristalsis. And then there's like, up and out energy, which is the spring, or what happens when you have a cold beer at the hockey game and you're cheering for your favorite team. That's up and out energy. And then there's uh, when you're having dinner with your wife at a nice restaurant and you have a nice glass of Chianti and it's kind of settled and down energy, we don't necessarily need to read textbooks about this, but from a feeling level, we kind of know and understand that there are these energies about the universe, and these energies are flowing in a ideal situation through our body in very specific and organized ways, just like Peachtree Road here in Atlanta at points has a going north only and at times has a going south, only lanes. And when cars are going the right way and there's not too much traffic, things are going well. And when they're going the wrong way or they're bumper to bumper, which is not uncommon here in Atlanta, there's a problem of stagnation of energy or flow. So these meridians are known avenues, streets, and circles. And I came to Atlanta from California. We didn't have lane and terrace and circle. We had avenue, street, and highway. And when I came here, I'm like, oh, there's Peachtree Road, there's Peachtree Avenue, there's Peachtree Terrace, there's Peachtree Circle. It's like, seriously, guys, like, did you not have like much of a imagination or vocabulary when you were naming streets here? But yes, there are these avenues, and we call them meridians. And when things are flowing well, the traffic is going the right direction and not bumper to bumper and not erratic. So that is kind of a something that we can probably all relate to is traffic. I just made that up, that analogy. I'm pretty proud of
No,
myself.
it's a good. It makes sense. Makes sense.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit. So how did you get interested? Did you get interested in herbs first or acupuncture first?
Neither. I got interested in martial arts, and I actually wasn't even really interested in martial arts, but a neighbor of mine urged me to sign up because he would get a discount if he got a buddy and he lived close. So then he figured that we could probably carpool in seventh grade over to the martial arts place. And then when I just dumb luck that the school and instructor I signed up with is kind of world renowned, and he would have other world renowned experts that are, as I didn't know this until like 20 years later. I was talking to other herbalists that also came from a martial arts background, and they were dropping these names, and I was like, oh yeah, I trained with him. He's like, what? You met that guy? I'm like, yeah, I met that guy. I was like 14 years old. And they're like, wow, that's like, Bruce Lee level famous in the martial arts world. I just dumb lucked out and started doing martial arts. So started seeing big men go down quick without, punching them, elbowing them and knees and stuff, just without blunt trauma, just pressing on the right points at the right angle and direction, meridians or pressure points, I would see just crazy stuff happen. And then it would be done to me where like, my instructor would just kind of touch the right part of my arm and my fist. And I'd all of a sudden go down to the floor tapping out. And then he'd let go of me and I didn't have a black eye and a bloody nose. I was fine. He just kind of touched the right point at the right angle. And I thought this was kind of magical. So I'm like, this is some cool stuff. I'm not sure what the rating is on these podcasts. So I'm going to try and refrain from using curse words, but that's sometimes hard for me.
Okay.
Um, Anyhow, so martial arts got me into the concept of chi and meridians and flow and balance and discipline. And these things also exist in the health realm. So when I started finding out about chi and flow, that got me into, well, you could poke and press and punch these pressure points in the wrong direction and cause injury or immediate pain without a whole lot of, I'm not a big guy, I'm 147 pounds soaking wet. So it's not like I'm going to blunt trauma my way out of an altercation with one or two big guys. So I had to get smart. And I'd get picked on a lot. I'm from Mexico and I moved into Atlanta at the sixth grade level, which is just a horrible age for any human being, especially, a foreigner in a foreign land that because kids are just assholes really at sixth grade. I'm sure I was an asshole too at that point, but I wasn't the new kid. So martial arts seemed like a interesting thing, especially after, I grew up in the era of Karate Kid, the wax on, wax off. So that's what got me into Chinese medicine is the martial arts, which translated easily into the healing arts because the concepts of qi, flow, yin, yang, meridians, points, balance are all the same. Then I just made it a formal study of finding out more about the meridians, the yin, the yang, the flow. And then that got me into herbal medicine, which is kind of my passion now. And the rest is history.
Wow. Which martial art?
It's called Chi Budo Kwan. It's a Korean style that has the big stances, but the kicking of Taekwondo.
Okay.
But we dialed in a lot of small circle jujitsu, as well as the kicking and punching and the big stances and forms like Tang Sudo style, Mudo Kwan. And then I also happened to just dumb luck train with in the arm Filipino modern arnis.
Okay.
So we did a little stick work. We did some sparring. We did a lot of the most fascinating stuff was the chi and the stuff where you're not like punching someone in the face.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like touching the right point on their calf or arm or wrist or something, and they buckle,
Mm-hmm.
like a rag. And that stuff, was really pretty cool to a 14-year-old that, was in danger of getting his ass beaten every couple of weeks.
Interesting. My background was all judo, so I had the Japanese, you know, philosophy that
Uh-huh.
a lot of Westerners don't get exposed to. I had a Japanese sensei growing up and learned a lot about Japan and the culture. So interesting, interesting. So let's talk about a little bit now. Now you work with a lot of people who are very ill, and you help a lot of people. And thank you for doing that because the world needs more healers, frankly, especially now. But let's talk a little bit about foods that fight cancer and other diseases.
I work a lot with cancer patients, and this is kind of this is on purpose now, but initially by accident. Weirdly, I actually early in my career, 2008, made it a point to not work with cancer patients because I was telling myself and others that I wanted to prevent cancer with the foods and the exercise and the acupuncture and the healthy living, and I still do. But the truth of the matter is that people, are people. They don't really want to change. And one of the best motivators, sadly, this is kind of a criticism of humans, myself included, is that generally speaking, humans don't really want to change until they're put up against the wall. And even then, some people don't want to change. So I kind of accidentally got a cancer patient 2011. And I had some training in functional medicine and Chinese medicine and herbal medicine, but not really in oncology. And this guy had gone to MD Anderson and Mayo Clinic and all different parts and gotten opinions that he didn't particularly like. And this is prostate cancer, and he was a fairly healthy guy. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll run the labs that I normally run on kind of just to be healthy in most people. And someone gave me Donnie Yance's book. And Donnie Yance is kind of one of the main international holistic gurus, if you will, of integrative and holistic oncology. And I did not read the book. I just skipped to the prostate cancer section, like like in high school, like, where are the cliff notes? And I skimmed it. And then I dialed in maybe half of what the book suggested, as well as the stuff that I knew to treat just based on his inflammatory levels, magnesium, zinc, vitamin D, just the general kind of be healthy interventions for diet and lifestyle. And lo and behold, without really knowing what the hell I was doing, his PSA went from 14 to 6 in less than a month.
Wow.
And I don't know what I was doing. And I still didn't read the book. And then he came back and he said, well, my doctor thinks it's a mistake. So it's a lab error. So he wants me to come back the next week and check the PSA again. I'm like, all right, cool. He came back and he's like, yeah, it was 6. So it went from 14 to 7. And the next week it was like 6.2. So it just kept falling. And then his doctor said that classic bullshit line of whatever you're doing, keep doing, which is one of the greatest cop-outs ever, because, those doctors see 30 of those guys a day. And rather than be curious, which is another sad state of human affairs of doctors, is that it's not that they're not smart, it's that they're not curious. And that, to me, means a lot more than what you were taught and what you memorized, is how curious are you? But sadly, that was one of many times I've heard it. And they just said, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to cut off your prostate or burn your prostate or, give you these horrible androgen deprivation drugs that cause all these other side effects, including ED and blah, blah, blah. And you just said, well, just keep doing what you're doing and we'll talk in 3 to 6 months. And I didn't really know what I was doing. So I was kind of shocked at my own results. And then so I said, well, this Donnie Yance guy is going to be at a conference in North Carolina. And I didn't read his book, but clearly he knows some stuff. So I went to go see him and I was pretty blown away by what he had to say about foods, about botanical medicine, about pharmaceutical medicine, about the functional medicine side of things, the traditional medicine side of things. And I was kind of at the edge of my seat the whole time, because not once have I ever heard a speaker talk intelligently about genetics and genomics and nutrition and energetics and metabolic pathways. Because typically, if they know about genetics, they don't know jack about meridians and qi and flow and yin and yang. And if they know about yin and yang and meridians, they don't know jack about genetics or genomics. So here was some freak nature that kind of knew a lot about all these things and had me at the edge of my seat. So yes, the food. In terms of prevention, it's a great thing to be eating clean and appropriate for your condition, which means that someone needs to be aware of their condition, which is its own topic. Appropriate for their environment, which you're in Dallas, I'm in Atlanta. It's a lot of pollen out there. That's part of the environment. We're not in Alaska in the winter, or we're not in Miami in summer. So we have our own kind of environment. And that includes a social environment, a physical and chemical environment. And then lastly, according to their constitution, which, I'm a tall, skinny Mexican guy. And, I can, due to my constitution, I can look at ice cream or Alfredo pasta and be fine. But if you give me a glass of red wine, I have hot flashes and night sweats. And people that are short and stubby, as their constitution, can look at ice cream and Alfredo and already gain weight. That doesn't make the Alfredo or the ice cream necessarily bad. It makes it maybe more appropriate for some people and less appropriate for others, based upon their condition, their environment, and their constitution. So when people ask me what to eat and they expect this kind of binary black and white Western mindset of reductionism, which is commonly and fortunately common, they want me to give them a list of good and bad food. And that simply, despite getting my degree in nutrition science from the University of Georgia, is just not very useful. So the first rule, if you will, is enjoy your food, whatever it is. And secondly, try to make it as clean as possible. That doesn't have to be organic, everything, right? But then ideally get to know your condition. I'm hot, I'm cold, I am revved up and excited, I am sedated, tired, lethargic, and brain foggy. And so that can then help determine what is for dinner, which is kind of the universal question. That rather than tell people this is what's for dinner, I'd rather teach them how to fish and say, well, how do you feel? You know? And so because people feel differently on different days, and because the weather changes, and because every blue moon, maybe, eventually, slowly, the constitution changes, right? My dad at this point has a beer belly on him. And, he at one point was a thin man for the majority of his life. And then he decided to eat on bread and cheese and not exercise. And now he's a different shape, which changed his constitution a little bit. But that didn't happen overnight. Mostly it's your condition, because you're stressed out because some guy cut you off in traffic, or because, Taylor Swift sold out her tickets and you can't get to the show. So it's the end of the world. So the food question is an interesting one. So rather than say, oh, you should eat these things that have X amount of methionine or lysine or, polyphenols, which is a language that I can speak if needed. Most people would rather just say, I feel hot. It's hot here, and it is Atlanta in the summertime. And yes, I could eat fried chicken. There's some delicious chicken and biscuits around here, and chicken and waffles, but maybe more seasonal appropriate would be the watermelon and mint. And maybe if I threw that in a blender with some fresh lemon balm from my garden and some fresh watermelon, and maybe just a little splash of rose water. And if I'm feeling like I need take the edge off a little bit more than that, is to throw a little sake in there, right? And that's my afternoon treat that I do for myself, because watermelon at room temperature is cooling. Ask a 5-year-old versus ask the same 5-year-old if ginger and cinnamon and cayenne pepper are warming at room temperature, and then we'll say the same thing. So the food question, I think, is a good question and easily answered without having to memorize stupid tables and facts and figures about calories and milligrams of this and moles of that. If someone just tunes in and then says, if I'm hot, then let's reach for something cooling. If I'm tight and compressed, let's reach for something that's relaxing, like a salad. If I feel really heavy and lethargic, maybe a thick bean stew with lamb is not the greatest thing. But if I am been, chopping wood outside all day long and it's Alaska in the wintertime, and I'm really needing something warming and hearty, that lamb stew might be the perfect thing. So it doesn't make the lamb stew good or bad. It doesn't make the person good or bad. It just makes them benefit from knowing, what's my condition, what's my environment, what's my constitution, and then there you can figure out what's for dinner. And yes, there are some foods that have some, but I think that's the first step, is rather than trying to go for the medicinal foods, let's just figure out like what's for dinner that will balance. Because if you live with pretty much balancing your condition 355 days a year, chances of you getting cancer are real low, because you have managed your condition, and more importantly, you've become aware of your condition. So yeah, we could talk about like cumin seed and turmeric and ginger and green tea, because they have a plethora of research with, cancer and different P53 and VEGF and, COX-2 and, blah, blah, blah. But I assume your listeners probably want to know what's for dinner rather than, how do I target cyclooxygenase 2, in my blood work that no one ran.
Exactly. And you know, I love your answer too, because one of the things that I find is some people stress so much about that subject that they actually probably cause themselves more harm than good because they're stressing so much about what it is that they're going to eat that they think is or is not the right thing. I mean, there's some obvious things we probably shouldn't eat, but once in a while on your birthday, you might want a piece of birthday cake. It's not the end of the world, is what you're saying. It's like,
Yeah, that's why I said 355 days out of the year, like have 10 splurge days, but then like know how that birthday cake affected your condition and then like make up for it,
like
right?
I found a few years ago that every time I ate, and I'm born in New Jersey, lived in New York, great Italian food, still would love to eat Italian food, but I just found that for some reason the tomato sauce, for whatever reason, now I got no problem with lycopene. I can eat tomatoes. I eat tomatoes today
Yeah.
myself, no problem. But for some reason, when I would eat the tomato sauce, all of a sudden the next day I would just be lethargic and almost sick. Like I enjoyed it going down, but the
Hmm.
next day it was almost like a food hangover.
Yeah.
I realized, okay, is it the pasta or is
Uh-huh.
the sauce? And it turned out, in my case, it would be the sauce, but it was like, okay, so I stopped eating the sauce, and it kind of solved the problem. But to your point, but let's stay on this though. This is such an interesting subject, and let me mention a couple of herbs that have become real popular the last couple of years, in the kind of in the mushroom category. Love the
My
input.
favorite.
So, reishi mushroom, it seems to be everywhere. Everybody that takes
Good.
herbs talks about it. What do we know?
Good. The more the merrier. Get it out there because you know what? It was highly venerated in traditional Chinese medicine thousands of years ago, above most all other herbs in the echelon of like, right? Not just like, oh, sprinkle it in your soups. But this is like it has a kind of a higher up the totem pole of like not just um food or medicine, but kind of borders on the spiritual healing side and highly venerated. But yes, reishi, and it happens to grow pretty much everywhere. It grows all up and down Ponce de Leon Avenue here in Atlanta,
Hmm.
right next to the road. I've caught some, if you will, in my own backyard. There's different species of it, Ganoderma curtesii versus lucidum, and you're kind of, splitting hairs. They all work. Um, they're all very neutral and safe. And whereas I really love people and clinicians and so not just clinicians and doctors, but like people to really get this concept of hot and cold, which is super easy. But in the case of reishi, because it is neutral, if your condition or your constitution or your pathology are hot, or if all those three things are cold, it doesn't matter because it's fine.
Hmm.
You're not going to mess it up, right? It's like a idiot proof thing because it's not too cold, it's not too hot, it's kind of right in the middle, and it helps you find it's an adaptogen,
Mhm.
helps you find balance. It doesn't push things up too much or down too much. It kind of nudges them just right. Some might argue that you wouldn't want to use it in a autoimmune condition. I would not be one of those people because I've used it almost every time in autoimmune conditions and people get better, not worse. So yes, reishi I'm a fan of all of, but all the mushrooms have their own mojo. Some are more warming, some are more drying, like turkey tail. I find particularly drying, which is not bad, but if someone already runs dry, then it might perpetuate their imbalance in that direction. But reishi doesn't. It's not particularly hot or cold or yin or yang or up or down. It's kind of just perfectly in the middle and calms the mind. It's an adaptogen, helps with energy level, antiviral. I don't really like to say anti anything because in reality, they're not anti anything. They're just pro. They're
Mhm.
pro immune function in many different ways, T cells, um, secretory IgA, balancing cortisol. When your cortisol is way off or your blood sugar is off, your immune system's not going to work as well. So, yeah, mushrooms, they're pretty awesome. People should eat them every day or find a way to get them in their tea or coffee or, whatever.
What about chaga?
Chaga is a great one. There's some good research with colorectal cancer and chaga. The problem with chaga is that it's somewhat endangered depending on what area you're in. I would love to see more commercially grown chaga. Arguably, part of the medicine, maybe the best part of the medicine is not the mushroom itself, but the substrate that it grew on. In this case, traditionally the beech trees, with the papery bark.
Hmm.
And so betulinic acid, which is in the beech tree, gets transferred to the chaga. But of course, if you grow the chaga on rice, you're not going to have the betulinic acid. And so it's a little problematic because maybe there's not that many beech trees and therefore there's not that many chagas. You can find some, but I use it, but if I can find other things to accomplish the same goal of like immune boosting, I do because I try to use it sparingly.
Now, something I became real fond of a few years ago, and I don't remember where I even heard about it. But during COVID, it was like, you listen to so much stuff because what else could you do? Like you became information overload. It may have been David Wolf was talking about it, but I heard of amla. And now amla really an herb or is more of a fruit? I know it's like Indian.
Yes, the answer is both.
Both.
It's a traditional Indian Ayurvedic fruit that makes a decent jelly. It's very high in antioxidants. It's very nourishing. I don't use it a ton in my practice, but I'm a fan because it's safe and also, from what I understand, not particularly hot or cold. So it's kind of more food-like. That's not going to push someone in a very strong direction the way a strong herb, might do that, like black cumin seed, which is very hot.
Mhm. I'm glad you said that about seed. I got another question. I keep writing down more questions. We could be here for a while, Oscar. Hope you don't have a date tonight.
Sadly, no.
Well, good. We'll be here for a while.
But yeah,
Not too long. Got a couple of more questions on this, but you know, ginseng is something that we hear about in the West all the time, right? But there's so many different. There's Siberian and there's white
yeah.
ginseng and there's seems like there's such a variety. Is there a specific one that you recommend, or up to the consumer to just kind of get what they can get?
Well, what do you think the answer might be? Just to not to be rude, but having heard me talk for the last bit, what do you think I would
I
say?
think your answer would. I think your answer would be that it depends on your condition.
There you go.
What do you look?
So
What do you
if
look at
your
a salt?
condition, there,
A
bingo.
result?
So now you're getting it. You're catching on. So it doesn't make ginseng is not categorically good or bad. The Asian ginseng, especially the way it's traditionally prepared, is warming, which is great. I used it today on a patient that runs cold. He sleeps with pajamas and socks and like a sweater.
Hmm,
Just today, he's like 27 years old, just a new patient that came in today. He's
interesting.
also anxious and tired. So ginseng was part of his formula. Red Asian ginseng, Panax ginseng. It wasn't entirely ginseng, but because his chief complaint was fatigue, that was a critical part of the formula that I compounded today. So I compound everything myself.
Mhm.
So, if it would have been because he's anxious and the ginseng is good for anxiety, because he's very tired and the ginseng is great for fatigue. Um, and because he's cold, the ginseng is warming. So that's a three characteristics of the herb that made the characteristics of the person that balanced out the characteristics of the person's condition, right? Anxious, cold, and tired.
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
calming, warming, energizing.
Got it.
So yeah, win, right? And then, but he's also pees frequently. So I added another adaptogen, Shazandra, which is maybe my favorite one next to reishi, because it's astringent. So he pees maybe 4 or 5 times a night right before going to bed. He's 27, right? And he pees every 2 hours during the day.
Hmm.
That's a lot of peeing. So the Shazandra is very astringent. It's also mind calming, runs a little anxious. So but that's not a huge part of formula because 10%, 15%, then that's a solid dose. And then I put some other stuff in there to help lymphatics. So I compounded some lymphatics with some nervines, with some energy tonics and some adaptogens. and made, like just like chefs do, man. Like it's an art, right? It's not like everyone gets the blue plate special. It's like when you pay the money for a chef that can curate a meal predicated upon like, well, what is your wife like? And what kind of wine is she into? And does she like spicy or does she like Cajun? And like, yeah, she does like Cajun, but not too spicy. Okay, got it. And it's this season, it's the summertime, you're going to be eating outside. A good chef will take all of that into consideration and create a fine dining experience, not just like, here's my, one size fits all Oscar special. See you later.
A couple other questions for you. So with turmeric, adding pepper to it, does it really make it work that much better, or is that an old wives' tale?
No, it probably does, but I'll tell you that the research on that was because of blood concentrations. And yes, traditionally, there's often black pepper in recipes in Indian cuisine, right? So simply because traditionally that's how it's done, that's good enough for me. Now, there's this bonus research that said, the bioprene, it's an alkaloid in black peppers, helps more term curcumin. There's a whole family of curcuminoids, but curcumin is one of them. So they found more curcumin in the blood of people that had taken the black pepper with the turmeric versus people that had not. And the jump to conclusions was therefore it works better. Maybe. Because if you're intelligent, you say, well, that's assuming that the mechanism of action is mediated through blood concentrations, which maybe is. But we know for a fact that a lot of the mechanism of action, or there's many in plants, right? There's always more than one, but it's presumptuous to assume that the only or even the main reason it quote unquote works is because it gets to our blood. Because what we do know is that something's never touched our blood, and they work great. Why? Because they modulate the internal microbiome, because they increase the secretion of some enzyme that has nothing to do with blood levels. So there's all these different pathways, right, of how something could work. So sure, I wouldn't get caught up on it. I would take that as like, okay, that's nice. But what am I trying to accomplish with it? Traditionally speaking, turmeric was used as a blood mover.
Hmm.
So if someone has stagnant blood, as evinced by, reddish or bluish nose, sublinguals under their tongue that are very engorged and dark and visible, poor circulation, your arm goes to sleep at night, your fibrinogen in your blood work is high, your INR is high, your PTT, your D-dimer is high. Guess what? You ain't moving blood very well. So turmeric would be in the realm of things, including other botanicals, nutraceuticals, dietary, maybe get off your butt and move around, do some jump jacks, do some cold plunges, something to, all these things can help move blood. So that's what I would be more concerned with is like, well, what are you trying to accomplish?
Hmm.
And how are you measuring that it's working or not working? Right. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
So here, a couple last questions, and I'll let you get home.
Sure.
So first question: traditional Chinese medicine, 10,000 or so years old. Ayurvedic medicine, 10,000 or so years old. Western medicine, however many years old. We'll come to that in a minute. But let's talk about.
Now, what time is it, right? That's how old it is.
Yeah, right. We'll be here forever. But
Yeah.
Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine, where are they the same, where they merge, right? In terms of dealing with patients and people
Uh-huh.
that are health, and where are they different?
Cool. Good question, John. The similarity that's between both Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine or classical Chinese medicine, depending on who you ask, is the same similarity to basically all other traditional forms of healing that I've ever learned about. And I took at least a couple semesters in college at UGA about traditional systems of medicine. I minored in medical anthropology. So I learned about what they were doing in Mesoamerica back before Whitey came around, and, you know, Tibetan medicine, as well as, old European humoral medicine, even old European humoral medicine, all kind of got this basic concept. Is the condition hot or cold? Is the intervention hot or cold?
Hmm.
We all know that cucumbers and watermelon are cooling. We all know that cinnamon and ginger and black pepper and black cumin seed are warming. So the similarity is energetics, at least hot and cold, and usually damp and dry. Things are drying or moistening, right? Okra, aloe, licorice, marshmallow, oatmeal, they're moistening,
Mhm.
right? But you suck on rhodiola for a second and it'll dry your mouth out. Or very tannic red wine that needs to breathe. You take a sip of that and it will dry your mouth out. So we understand hot and cold, we understand damp and dry. Some also understand kind of up and down. So those are the similarities, is energetics. The difference is Ayurvedic seems to have a lot more metals in there. Chinese medicine is excellent in the realm of gynecology. I would say that is his strength, is gynecological conditions, because it's very nuanced. In Western conventional medicine, if a woman has a heavy period or a light period, guess what? They get the same treatment, oral contraceptives. If they have clots versus cramping, guess what? They get the same medication. If they have endometriosis versus PCOS, pretty much get the same treatment. So it's like everything's a nail because you only got a hammer.
Mm.
In Chinese medicine, all of these things, if the cycle is 26 days versus 32 days, that's a different treatment, right? So it's very nuanced in diagnostic, and therefore it's nuanced in intervention. And so gynecology, I'd say, is a definite strength. I don't know a ton about Ayurvedic, but I drink Centella Gotu Kola tea pretty much every day because it helps my mind work better and it tastes pretty good and it really works with my body type. And so that's a nice Ayurvedic one, which is actually in the Chinese medicine pharmacopoeia. It's just not one of the top 300 herbs.
Mhm.
I do yoga a lot. I really love the yoga in terms of movement and the chakras and stuff, balancing. They're not mutually exclusive. I think they're all just talking about the same stuff. They just named it different things.
And working now with the allopathic, Western doctor, so to speak, right? Western medicine as we know it, right? Which has a place certainly too. I think, my opinion, this is my opinion, is, we rush off to the allopathic doctor who says, well, let me cut you. Okay, or let me, put this drug in your body, as opposed to, well, let's look at all these other modalities maybe first, unless we're dying. I mean, if you're in an emergency room, fine, but there's a place for everything, I guess. I know you agree with that, but what I've loved to see over the last few years, for example, I go to a chiropractic clinic here, and that chiropractor has started to work with a traditional MD who does stem cells, for example,
You
where
mean a conventional MD?
yeah, conventional MD, because chiropractor can't give you a shot, and the stem cells are by a shot. For example, I've got from all my judo stuff, my hips are shot, my right shoulder shot, so I get stem cells once a year. Anyway, point being that, and he's got some other things in there where I'm watching all of a sudden the people who used to go, I'm on this side of the road, I'm on this side of the road, we don't speak to each other. Now they're kind of going, hey, you know what's important? Let's, some of them, not all of them, obviously, not enough of them, but more of them than I think, in my career selling supplements and all that for 40 plus years, where these guys wouldn't talk to each other. Now they're saying, to your point, maybe the guy down the street can help my patient. And isn't that what I'm supposed to do? And be it through acupuncture, be it through herbs, be it through, any other holistic type of thing, and possibly the need for Western medicine at some point. I'm watching these people work together. So here's my question, Oscar, is I know you're working with guys that are, traditional MDs there in Atlanta, for example.
Conventional MDs, yeah.
Conventional. What's been in your experience over your career? What do you think has been the change in philosophy?
I think they're just more honest about their stuff doesn't work very well unless you get hit by a truck, like that's great for that. But most people are not dying of falling anvils from the sky and trucks going rogue. They're dying of cancer. They're dying of diabetes. They're dying of heart disease. Statins don't really help. Stents don't really help. I mean, if you look at the published literature in JAMA, oncology has like the worst success rate of all Western medicine. So they weren't trained in this stuff, but I think because patients, not doctors, are demanding it, they're having to, kind of get their head out of their butt and say, okay, well, maybe try these other things before I give you these opioids, which are clearly dangerous. Or, I think we have the same goals. So if someone, an oncologist per se, wants to do some aromatase inhibition and they want to prescribe a pharmaceutical with all these side effects, I say, okay, I agree with the aromatase inhibition. Let's try it the natural way first and measure the estrogen levels. So if they don't go down low enough, then we'll dial in a little bit of the drug. How's that? And the doctors were like, well, that sounds reasonable. I mean, basically saying, try the safe thing first. And if you can objectively measure its efficacy and it doesn't get to where we need to, then yeah, dial in the big guns of chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. But if we're trying to shrink a tumor and then cut it out, okay, hold my beer. Watch me shrink the tumor and then you cut it out. And if it's not shrinking as per blood work or imaging or, a circulating cell, tumor cell DNA, because I mean, I'm not saying my stuff always works. I'm saying I always check before and after to see that I'm at least going in the right direction. And if I'm not getting the results I want, then yes, let's dial in some pharmacy, but to quote the great Russ Jaffe, MD, PhD, friend of mine, 80 years old, and been there, done that, gotten the autograph and the poster in the book. He says physiology before pharmacology.
Mm.
So get your physiology working better before you dial in the pharmacology or before you radiate it or before you cut it off. Now, obviously, you get hit by a train, you're not going to be trying to get your exercise regimen on point. You want some freaking drugs, you know? Yeah, do that. But that's not the main problem. That's not why people are, disappearing. So I think to answer your question, because A, patients demand it, B, the word is out, their stuff doesn't work very well. And if it works, it comes with all these other side effects.
Okay.
And C, they're kind of just being honest about the patients want it and our stuff doesn't work that great. So that's why.
Great. Last question, and I'll let you call it a day. I'm sure you've been at your office all day there. So now you compound and ship out of state, or is everything just local?
I compound a lot of my nebulizer mixes, tinctures, topicals, suppositories, vaginal, rectal, topical ointments, essential oil mixes, granular mixes. I halfway joke that if you have a hole, we'll find a way to get herbs in there. Um, but I also, sometimes there's something already in a bottle that is perfectly adequate that I don't need to get my staff to compound. So for the botanicals, I usually compound. And if I'm not compounding, it's a company that I know and trust, and I know the owners personally that are herbalists, because I don't trust companies that sell herbs that don't have an herbalist on staff. Because, there are companies that make a great B6 and B12 that's clean and doesn't have any weird food coloring or additives in there, but they don't know crap about herbal medicine. What part of the plant, when to pick it, how to process it. These are things that herbalists know, not someone that may know what B6 is or B12 or even its methylated form. Like, okay, well, these are typically different people, unless they're freaks like Donnie Yance.
Great, great. So if people want to reach you, be it in the Atlanta area or if they're out of state, if they want.
Yeah, I work with patients all over the world, especially cancer patients. I have a nonprofit that I'm very proud of, and there's a good bit of my brain for free
Hmm.
online. And they can dial in their chemo, their side effects, and plug it into the computer, and it will output things that they can do to have fewer side effects from their conventional chemo or radiation. Tons of free resources on www.mojohealth.org. That is not my clinic, but it's the thing I'm most proud about. I stay pretty busy here at my clinic in Atlanta, and I see patients all over the world, and that is Sierra Botanica and Collaborative Medicine. We have a website somewhere. It may be down right now because we forgot to pay the fee. We don't really do much with the website, but people find me. So yes, they're welcome to call our clinic and do in-person or remote. I'd like to feel pulses.
What's the
I
clinic?
can do some stuff.
What's the clinic's number too if people want to call?
678-361-6523, Sierra Botanica and Collaborative Medicine. And then the website for the cooler website by far is the Mojo nonprofit one,
Mo,
mojohealth.org.
Mojo Health dot org. Okay.
.org. Yep.
Okay. .org. Okay. So Mojo Health, MOJO health.org.
More joy. That's what it stands for. One of my cancer patients who came to me, a little over two years ago with stage 4 colorectal cancer, 14% chance of living, thought that she'd come in and, burn some incense and balance chakras. And instead I said, we got to get some data and find some information about you, your condition, your magnesium levels, your vitamin D levels, your inflammatory levels, your hemoglobin A1C, your insulin, your estrogen levels, your environmental exposure levels, the cancer genomic fingerprint of does it have a KRAS mutation or a P53 mutation? Because I'm going to probably recommend some chemo, but I want it to work. So it depends on what kind of cancer you have at the genomic level. Her doctors measured exactly 0 of these things. And she did not do what the doctors recommended. She did what I recommended. And she's now over a year and a half with no evidence of disease, despite bucking the system and not doing what the doctors suggested, losing 136 pounds worth of weight that needed to come off. And then she's now my concert buddy. We're about to go to Jazz Fest for the 2nd time in a row. So we go party together and check out Billy Strings and all kinds of awesome music and go dancing. We're best friends now. She said, Oscar, you saved my life, but why doesn't everyone else do this? I was like, I don't know. So we need to start a nonprofit to teach the world that not necessarily through me. They just have your herbalist and your acupuncturist and your pharmacognosist and your oncologist. Have them do this stuff because it works and it's not a one size fits all. It's different because everyone's constitution, environment, condition, and pathology are unique. So the intelligent and inspired clinician takes these things into account and creates some art.
Wow. This has been great. Thank you so much for being you. Thank you for your commitment to other people's health and helping people to get healthy and all the knowledge that you've given us just in a brief period of time. And there's a lot more here. So I hope our people will go up to mojohealth.org and become either customers or follow you. And what you're doing is phenomenal. And once again, thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. We're putting more and more information and podcasts on the mojohealth.org thing. We're still looking for investors so we can put way more out there because we've all been working for free for 2 years. So if any of you guys know some people that want to help further the cause and help way more people and train way more oncologists, check out mojohealth.org.
Great. Great. Thanks so much, Oscar.
Thank you, John.